All right, everybody, welcome, welcome, welcome. So today we're going to talk about the habit of empowerment. I've spent a lot of time looking back over the last years of my life and how I was able to create a top 2.5% podcast in the world and what kind of communication was behind it, what kind of habits did I have that produced those kind of results. And we're going to talk about it for the next 7 days. We are going to talk about the habits that produce an amazing results when it comes to communication, when it comes to podcasting, and all of that stuff. Okay. Now, first, we're going to talk about the habit of empowerment, and that is both that you live from an empowered state and that you have the ability to empower others. In fact, it's my personal belief that I don't think you can be a very empowering person unless you first are personally empowered. There's no equation where you show up and start empowering a bunch of people and you yourself live in a very low state, right? So personal empowerment starts with you and it spreads into others the same way that you have to love yourself before you begin to love others. There's no equation where you can love others and degrade and treat yourself badly. It just, the equation does not work. Okay. So by the end of this, what you are going to have is a focus for your communication, how you show up, how you're going to communicate. And I've spelled it out in a nice little acronym called FOCUS. And that is you frame the episode and why it matters. You open with your big idea. You control the pace. You go with the flow. And you make sure that you're communicating in a very high status way. And that is your word choice and your communication doesn't come off as low status. And then you send them somewhere. That is your call to action. Now, it doesn't matter what inside of life that your habits, they are going to make or break you. So when it comes to cash flow, credibility, influence, and impact, that your habits are either going to help you create that or your habits are going to break that. And the cool thing about that is you get to decide what kind of habits that you have in order to produce the results. And if we don't like the results that we're getting in our communication or anything, then we have to go back and ask ourselves, well, what are the habits? What are my choices? What am I doing to produce those kind of results inside of life? All right. So the next 7 days, I'm taking you on a journey. If you are a creator, if you want to create influence, if you are a speaker, if you use any form of communication to mold and shape minds, whether it's books, courses, or whatever, this is going to be your cup of tea for the next 7 days because I'm going to show you how to elevate your message, your communication, and it's going to elevate the way that you show up inside of the world, on social media, on your podcast. All right. So elevate. The first E is for empower, and that is you take responsibility. This is what we are going to talk about today. The next one is L. It's a landmark. Have you set and defined the destination? So whether you are speaking or whether you're building a business, you have to begin with the end in mind. And that is you have to set the destination. That is your landmark. Then we have E, execute. What are you doing? What are your priorities? What are the actions that you are taking? And then we have V, which is value. Are you thinking win-win? Are you thinking mutual benefit? Are you building relationships? Are you networking with your contents? A is attuned. Are you attuned to your audience? Are you attuned to your guest? Are you attuned to your own style of communication? T is team up. Are you creating synergy around you? Energy and synergy. Are you willing to partner and connect with other people? And E is energize. Are you energizing person? Are you energizing yourself? Are you renewing yourself? Are you looking to increase your talent, skills, and abilities? Now, About 3 years ago, I got a habit coach. And people get a habit coach because they're trying to integrate new solid habits inside of their life. Maybe they've had a history of prolonged detrimental habits. Maybe they don't like the current results that they're getting. At any rate, a habit coach gets you integrated inside of routines and behaviors that get you results. So these next 7 days, I'm going to be your podcast habit coach. And that is, I'm going to clearly define the habits that are going to get you the success that you are looking for. Now, I've talking about this thoroughly in the past, is that we think that talent is the differentiating factor, is that they have to have a lot of talent in order to be successful. When in reality, a lot of it has to do with habits. That is the discipline and the routine of showing up in a consistent manner. In fact, I've interviewed some football stars who were in the NFL, and they said talent isn't the end all be all. In fact, it is talent is part of the equation, but there was a lot of talented people, they said, that would miss practice or didn't do the reps or didn't do all of these things, and they were talents, but they didn't have the discipline necessary. They were talented, but they were narcissistic and filled with their own ego, and they weren't teachable. There was multiple different equations where talent wasn't the end all be all. It was actually the habits and the disciplines. In fact, if you've been a coach, you know this, that you would rather have the person who shows up consistently at all times and is working and is doing the reps and is getting better and better over that cocky, talented person who doesn't show up and do any of the work. All right? That's the reality. So the habits are the foundation for the results that you are looking to get inside of your influence, inside of your communication. Now, Donald Miller, he is one of my personal favorites. If you're not familiar, he is the founder and the writer of the StoryBrand, and that really breaks out the hero's journey motif and how we can begin to operate inside of business, inside of that motif. I think this is one of the top 10 books that have shaped how I've created a podcast business and how I show up on social media is related to that book. Super, super good. All right. So he's in a conference room. He's got his whiteboard. Now it's early, man. The coffee is cold. There are 10 business owners who stare at him like he's a wizard that is supposed to fix all of their pain. So he starts talking. And at first he does what most people do, and that is they begin to explain, and he adds stories. He's a storyteller, right? He begins to add examples, and then he gives the more stories, and he can hear his own voice get longer and softer as he's not getting the validation that he was looking for, or the approval, or the amen, or whatever it is that he was looking for from the crowd. And so he starts to watch, and their faces are beginning to drift. And he sees a guy, and he reaches in his pocket, and he checks out his phone. He's like, oh my gosh, I'm losing these people. I'm not connecting. I'm not hitting home. And then he looks over to the left, and he sees this woman over there, and she's like folding her arms, and he's like, oh. And he can just feel the blood pressure just begin to rise inside him. All right. And he knows and understands what is going on. He knows the pain that they're all experiencing, because years ago, he wrote books and books about all of these stories. But he was sitting in a room of business owners whom a story would not suffice. Now, stories are good for inspiration. Not so much when the rubber meets the road, because they needed more than inspiration. They needed direction. Now, when people don't buy into us, when they don't listen to us, it's easy to blame the market. Right now, people are currently blaming the algorithm. Facebook changed their algorithm. It's no longer in my favor, blah, 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 right? Or people they just don't get what it is that I'm saying. And at that moment, as Donald is talking, he understands something is that they are not with me, they are not following me, and they're not carrying on in their action because they are confused, right? They are confused. And so what does he do? He brings clarity. Now, his old habit of just talking until he finds a point, he drops it, he stops mid-sentence, and the room gets quiet. And he takes in a deep breath, and he turns to the whiteboard, and he writes one sentence in big letters. And he writes, if people are confused, they will not buy. And then he draws a simple line in front of it. And then he gets the people to look at that and understand, when you leave here today, you are going to be absolutely clear on what it is that you're communicating and the message that you are giving. All right. So are we showing up as empowering people and bringing clarity, as much clarity as possible? Now, the day of information is over, and that is, people do not need more information. We have information at our fingertips. What people need is inspiration, and they need insights into themselves. And so comes the first habit. Are we in the habit of empowering people? Are we empowered ourselves? Are we instilling in them a sense of responsibility and personal efficacy that they can decide and that they can make the choice and they can do the thing that it is that they want to do? Now, let me take you into the psychology behind this. Is that personal efficacy you think is just a given, right? Is that people understand that they can make choice and change and do all of these different things. But what we often take for granted because, maybe we've got kind of the responsibility thing down, is that in general, a lot of people don't live there. They don't live in a sense of empowerment and personal efficacy. And what I mean by that is they don't actually feel like they have a choice. Inside of our victimized culture, and we've been programmed to become victims or animals, that the majority of the population lives in one of those two categories. They either live in victimhood or they live in animalistic impulsehood. One of those two. And the majority of people live there. And so it's not a given that they feel empowered. And that's the reason why we come along, because we have empowered ourselves and therefore we can begin to empower other people. All right. It takes empowered people to empower people. Man, you could take that bank to the bank and cash it. It takes empowered people to show up in the world and empower people. There's no equation where a person who lives in victimhood shows up and spreads empowerment. There is no equation where somebody is inside of the ego and the animalistic impulses and who goes along and spreads empowerment. It doesn't happen. And this is why the habit starts with your own personal empowerment. How am I going to empower myself so I can begin to spread empowerment? All right. And this shows up as the most proactive, the most responsible, the version of me who takes responsibility. What that means for your message is that you don't show up ill-prepared. It doesn't matter whether you're speaking on a stage. It doesn't matter whether I'm speaking on this mic right here. You're never going to find a day where I don't show up here with a point. Never. All right? I'm going to show up every single day and I'm going to drive home some points. I'm going to have the most clearest communication as possible. Not to say that somebody can't communicate better than me, but to the best of my talent, skills, and abilities, I'm going to show up with a point. My point today is that there are habits that need to happen inside of your life in order for you to be successful with your message, with your podcast, and with your inspiration and with your influence. If you want to create impact, you are going to have the habit of responsibility of empowering yourself and empowering others. All right? That means I don't wing it. Now, there is a place for winging it, but even some of the winging it is not particularly winging it. You still have a frame and idea of what it is that you're going to talk about. Now, sometimes in like question and answer formats, I kind of enjoy spur of the moment. I really enjoy being caught off guard, you know. But as far as the audience is concerned, I'm going to talk a lot slower. I'm going to be a lot methodical. There's going to be a lot more pauses because I'm going to be digging for the information within my own soul. So it's going to be a different kind of content. All right. But the reality is that we cannot show up and just wing it. If we show up ill prepared, people are going to notice. First, we don't know what we're talking about. Second, we are rambling. And third, after it's all over, they don't even know the point. Might have been good entertainment. We don't record and just wing it. We have at least a skeleton. We have a direction. We have a point. Now, when it comes to sermons, the most impactful ones inside of my life and the ones that I can still remember to this day, they had one point. That's it. You look at Martin Luther King's dream speech, he had one point. He talked, I believe, for like 7 minutes, and he just laid out a vision of a future world of what it could look like when we all dwell together in unity and not be judged by the color of our skin, but the content of our character. He had a clear defining point, and he was taking people along that journey. All right. He didn't just jump up there and say, you know what? Today, I'm just going to wing it. I'm just going to go with the flow today. No, he had a point, and he showed up to deliver that point. And if you look at his sermon, 7-minute sermon, that is probably one of the most epic things, most known that anybody ever knows. And he literally had one point. That's it. All right. So the habit of empowering yourself is an intentional form of communication, that I am responsible for the way that I show up, and that I'm not going to show up as a reactive person. I'm going to show up as very proactive. Proactive is a person that has a point. A reactive person just going to show up and wing it and ramble. You see, proactivity and responsibility decides the outcome for the listeners. Not checking the weather to see what the world wants the outcome to be, not trying to figure it out as you go along. No, you get on the camera and the mic and you decide the outcome. You are the one responsible for your communication. And you are the one who is taking somebody on a journey to somewhere, all right? You decide the outcome for your listeners. And so this is the responsibility of, wow, my communication then is really, really important, especially when it comes to transformation. Because if I can get somebody to accept the belief that I am promoting, then I can get them to take the actions that are necessary. And thereby, I'm going to produce transformation inside of their life. Your one point should lead them to a practical action. I'm going to lay that all out for you by the end of this episode, how that plays out, okay? So we're going to structure our episodes in a way that drives our point. We're going to speak clearly so people can understand what we're talking about. And we're going to take responsibility for our message, because the reality is if your listeners are confused, most of the time, it's not their fault. If we leave church and everybody's looking at each other and saying, what the heck was that about? Whose fault is it? Is it the ears or is it the person delivering the message? If somebody gets up there and delivers their 10-point sermon with all of these different points with no practical action, and people walk away with no transformation, whose was responsible for the transformation? The communicator is responsible. And so it is when you show up, any sort of influence is you are the one responsible for the transformation, for the seed that gets planted for the transformation. Now, you can't guarantee that they're going to take action on your outcomes, but what you can guarantee is if they do take action and begin to implement, they are going to get results sooner or later. All right. So the habit of responsibility is that podcasting is filled with pitfalls, and that is there are constantly things that we're going to face, walls that we're going to come up against, enemies, that different things that come against us in the form of resistance. I look at my podcast and I think, there's multiple different things that were resistance, but some of them are bad guests. After interviewing hundreds and hundreds of entrepreneurs, you're almost guaranteed to have a bad guest. And that is a bad guest that didn't check the box with the vibes that you were running with. I mean, they were a low status person and they started talking and it really didn't hit home. And two people are coming to mind that I have interviewed that were very, very low status, and the energy that they were exuding off of them was nothing that I would want to spread. All right. And so I never published their episode. You're going to face different things inside of podcasting that is going to be uncomfortable, that's not going to sit right, all these different things. Okay. You're going to have restarts. The one way that I guarantee that I don't have restarts and that I just hit the ground running is doing this. I just go live. And that makes sure that I just show up and try to get in the flow. I don't try to figure everything out. I don't try to have this polished, beautiful beginning. I just jump in there and I go, and I hope that somewhere along the lines that communication flow will begin to hit me. And so this makes sure that I'm not constantly doing restarts. It is absolutely exhausting to restart after the fourth or fifth time. In fact, by the end of it, you might critique yourself once again and you might not even publish it. So live, for me, it defeats all of that. I don't get into my refining mode. I don't get to anything. Like, it is what it is. I'm going to show up and I'm going to deliver my message to the world. There is no restarts. There is no do-overs. I'm just going to get in there and I'm just going to go. Now, that might not work for you, but it works for me. All right. Distractions. I hate it. When the ambulance goes, man, we live next to a senior home that is kind of the end of the road sort of thing. And there's, 2 to 3 ambulances every single day. And no matter what I do, I can't soundproof where it is that I'm located. And I hate distractions. I hate it when somebody comes over and the dog barks. But after these distractions over and over, it's like, stay in the zone. Life sometimes throws you this different things. You can get frustrated. You can want the most polished thing as possible. And these things seem to come along. It's like, whatever, move on. Let's go. Or you produce an episode that you thought was pretty good and you get a negative comments. I don't know how many times I've gotten negative comments. Some were absolutely warranted and deserved. Some people just absolutely hated me. And it is what it is. And then we have the numbers dip. I've been podcasting for 6-7 years, multiple different podcasts. This podcast here is fresh and it's brand new. It's got like 9 episodes, just launched it. The other podcast that I have has 400 plus episodes. And you are going to get seasons where the numbers dip. It's par for the course. And that is, people consume content at different times and seasons throughout the year, more than others. When it's summertime, you'll probably notice a dip. You think that you'll get more people because they have more space and time. And no, they're worried about their vacations and their summer bods and all of these different things. And a lot of their normal patterns and routines have been busted. They used to listen to you on the way to work, and now they're doing all this other thing. So there are times and seasons where the numbers dip. That's just the reality. And so we got to ask ourselves, are we going to be proactive and take responsibility for ourselves? Are we going to roll with the punches? Are we going to just go for it? Are we going to stay consistent? Are we going to carry on? Is it going to be water off a duck's back? Or is it going to be the thing that breaks us? When we get constructive criticism and we look at that, do we focus on honing our craft and getting better? Or do we let it sink into a heart level and get discouraged? We get to decide how we show up in the world, even in the form of resistance and barriers that come our way. All right. So let me tell you, there is a weak focus and a strong focus. And if you want to have a habit that produces success inside of your influence, then you should not be too concerned about the weak focus. These are the things that pat the back and inflate the ego. These are all correlated to numbers. The strong focus that you should focus on is your craft and getting better and better. Now, the weak focus is how many downloads did I get today? Now, it feels good when you're breaking records, but every day you're not going to break a record. Like I broke a record last week. I think it was like 750 downloads in one day, which was a record, which is amazing because I used to get 750 downloads in a month. And so it felt really good to break the record. But if you have the habit of being, that is the only thing that you are concerned about, then your perseverance, your motivation is going to be directly correlated to your downloads. And let me tell you, that's a fast track to give up. Sometimes you're doing good, and sometimes you're doing not so good. Sometimes it's ebb season, and sometimes it's flow season. I had to learn this the hard way as a youth pastor. I pastored one of the biggest youth groups in the city and prided myself, and it inflated my ego, and it gave me a sense of worth and identity. And I'm like, look at me, pastoring one of the biggest youth groups inside of the city. I mean, we had hundreds of kids, and it was an amazing experience. But as a new booty, and that is, I didn't understand times and seasons. So when the second year rolled in, after the new hype of the fresh new pastor and the hipster and all of these different things, and then vacations begin to happen and the numbers begin to drop off and all of these different things, I was like, I went from this mountaintop to this low. And I began to think, what is wrong with me? And it was based upon numbers. When numbers were good, I felt good. When numbers were bad, I felt bad. And only to watch the numbers begin to climb once again during different times and different seasons, and only to feel good again to watch them begin to decline during the other seasons and to feel bad again. I'm like, I gotta get off of this roller coaster. I gotta stop having my validation, my worth attached to numbers. Otherwise, this is good. This is going to be the death of me. I can't hang with the roller coaster. And that's what happens when your concern is downloads or who shared my content, who is giving me likes and who is giving me loves. How many hearts did I get from this social media post? What are my competitors doing right now? What are they saying? What is the algorithm saying right now? Should I go and get my tinfoil hat and show up on social media? Right now, the algorithm is rewarding some of the base, low status stuff inside of the world. It is inspiring hate and anger and animosity. It is creating divisions and strife and all these different things. And let me tell you, if you want to know what the algorithm is rewarding, then you are going to have to step inside of being that kind of person, because that's what people are looking for. Now, the influence or the strong focus or the habit that you should be focusing on is your craft. Am I showing up, working on myself and my content to the best of my ability? Are my hooks good? Am I hooking people good from the beginning? Have I mapped out my first 60 seconds inside of my communication? Now, this doesn't matter whether you are speaking, whether you have a podcast, whether you're going on stage, or whether you're writing hook for chapter 1. Okay? Is my hook solid? Am I pulling people in within the first 60 seconds? Do my stories bring clarity? Do I bring clarity? Do I have a solid call to action? Do I have a single point that I am delivering? Am I communicating effectively? Am I leading them to practical action? If I have a guest, am I pulling and extracting the gold from them? Am I showing up daily, doing what I need to do for my podcast success? So, weak focus, downloads, shares, likes, competitors, algorithm. Will these people like me? Am I getting the validation? Let me tell you, if you're getting into podcasts for validation, you're in the wrong sport, because a lot of it is one-sided communication and the feedback is very little. So if you're looking for validation through this, let me tell you, you're going to be one of the people that give up. This is not for the weak. All right. This is not for the faint of heart. This is not for those who want their ego to be stroked. All right. So the strong focus, your hook, your first 60 seconds, your stories, your call to action, your consistency, how you're showing up. Now, the next level of the habit of responsibility and empowering yourself is, how am I communicating? Am I communicating in reactive language? And that is, I'm not good at this at all. Is this the kind of language that we are speaking? Now, let me give you some insight. Is that at the beginning, everybody sucks. Now, some suck a little bit less, but they still suck. Like when you started beginning to go from crawl to walking, you sucked. When you began to start forming words, you sucked. When you started getting those into sentences, you sucked. Like all of these different things, like the reality is that all of us suck. And that is, as the old saying goes, and the person who wrote that book, you got to embrace the suck. And that is, you got to show up and get your reps and get your practice on, even if you suck. Even if you're terrible and lousy, because the only way to get better at your craft is to continually, repetitiously, part of your habits, do it, and then refine it as you move along. And that is that you get better and better. Okay, we all suck. Gosh, I've listened to some of my first podcasts, and I would like to, and I think one of my podcasts I did kind of obliterate so the world doesn't see it. But there's some still out there. In fact, my first live that I did on Facebook, oh my gosh. Oh, it's so cringy. It is so cringy. 9 years ago, I took to Facebook Live, and it went absolutely positively viral, according to Facebook at that time. And it was just raw. Just me sharing like emotions and all this. It was just very raw, and it connected with a lot of people. And it spread like wildfire, and thousands upon thousands. I think the final count was somewhere like 50,000 people viewed this video. And every once in a while, it'll come up inside of my memories, and I'll watch a little bit of it, and I just cringe. And it's super, super cringy. But we all start somewhere. Now, let me tell you, I sucked, and I sucked hard. I was absolutely terrible. So what kind of reactive language are you saying? How are you showing up on the mic? Is it reactive? Is it low power? Is it apologizing? I'm sorry, this episode is late, or I hope this helps, or this ultimate one, though, where I cringe when I hear it is, am I making sense? Does that make sense? Well, it should, because we're both adults having a conversation. And of course, you're making sense because you're communicating at a level of an adult. So of course. And the reality is if we're not making sense, they're going to tell us that we're not making sense. We don't have to say things and second guess it all the time and says, does that make sense? They'll let us know if it doesn't make sense. All of this is very low level reactive sort of language. Yes, you make sense. Proactive language is, this is what I'm talking to you about today. This is where we are going. This is the benefit that you can receive today. Let me make this practical for you. Let me tell you the psychology behind this. Let me challenge you with this. You see how the vocabulary is very different. It's very assertive, and it's coming from a place of power. This is why I always say, let me tell you the psychology behind this. I want to give you insights. I want to take you behind the scenes of what I think about this. So your vocabulary is either instilling certainty or it's instilling hesitation. And let me tell you, the people on the other side, they can feel it. All right. So the next one is the habit of creating change. Now, the art of communication isn't sounding smart. It's moving people. Now, I would be ignorant to not point out that people grab the mic for all kinds of different reasons. And not everybody has good intentions when they grab a microphone. And so I understand that. But when a high status person grabs a microphone, they are grabbing the microphone to communicate for change and transformation. When a low status person grabs a microphone, they're grabbing it from their insecurities and their fears. And that is they're grabbing the microphone so they can share how smart they are, so they can be seen as intelligent, so they can get the validation of how smart they are. Or if you're a different kind of personality, you grab the microphone to tell a bunch of inspirational, fluffy little stories to get people sentimental and get people to like you. Or people grab the microphone so they can be the commander, the authoritarian, so they can beat people into submission, so they can use fear tactics to dominate and control. I mean, the list can go on and why different people grab the mic. High status people, they do it to create change and to create influence. They know that they are grabbing the mic to produce transformation. So this takes us back to, where am I taking people? After I'm done talking, what do I want them to believe? After I'm finished, what do I want them to do? What insights am I bringing? What clarity am I bringing? What emotions am I stirring? This is all correlated to the communication for change. Now, it's amazing that we have buildings all across the United States on every single street corner, and there are podiums and there are microphones in those locations. And each week, a man or a woman steps up to the mic with energy. And they're either low status or they're high status. They're either communication to fill some gap in their ego, or they're communicating to bring change and transformation into the lives of people. Now, let me tell you from honest perspective, the low status is a lot higher than the high status. And that is, there's not many people communicating to create transformation and change inside of people. All right. So let's bring this back to a framework. And that is something that you can begin to produce. So focus, F, frame the episode. Why this episode matters. What are they going to learn? Oh, what is the big idea? So before you launch an episode, think of focus. Frame. What is my frame for the episode? And that is the skeleton. All right. I'm here communicating to you with the skeleton frame. And that is, I mapped out where it is that I wanted to say, where it is that I wanted to take you, what kind of habits that I wanted to present to you. And I've set the frame, the skeleton of the conversation. One big idea is probably that habits are going to create your success. So you need to find out the habits that you need to have in order to be successful. C is to control the frame. That is, you move along inside of the conversation, you control the frame. You is you, use high status language. If you find yourself using any sort of victim talk or any sort of talk that doesn't lead to responsibility or high status, recognize it, get it out. All right. And then S is to send them somewhere. That is a call to action. So here's your call to action. All right, you ready for it? That when you communicate, make one point and write down the point first. All right. My point inside of this communication is, all right. So you write that down. And then you go to the end, you go to the practical action. What action do I want them to take because of this point? All right. So now you have your point and you have your practical action. You basically have your beginning and your end kind of clearly spelled out. And now it's time to create the skeleton. And the skeleton is the path that you're going to take to the practical action. All right. So you have one point. Now, what you're going to do after the point is paint the picture. This is where you bring in a story or something that's going to capture people, that is going to paint the picture of your point. Not a new picture, not another point, that is going to reaffirm your initial point. So you paint the picture. Now, during that time, a lot of people choose to paint multiple pictures, and there's nothing wrong with that. Okay. But you have to begin to get people on the right side of their brain so they can connect the dots and so they can feel what it is that you're talking about. All right. So after you paint the picture, you go into the problem. All right. The problem is connected to the point. So if your point is, I'll just pull one out of thin air, is that men need to develop self-control. Self-control is a fruit of the Holy Spirit. All right. Let's just say that was the point. you would paint your pictures for that point. There's a lot of Bible stories that showed men that lack self-control, right? Stories, input, picture. And then you go the problem. What is the problem? Is that in this scenario, a lot of men haven't developed self-control. And then you would go into the pain that is associated with that problem. Why is this important? What are the consequences of this? Why is this painful? And then you would go into the possibility. Now, the possibility is connected to the principles. So you can see how these are all P's. They're easy for me to remember that way. Okay. The possibility is a setup for the principles. So the possibility is what could be possible if men learn self-control. Then you go into all the possibilities. Then you go into the principles. Now you can pull these from Bible. You can pull these from authoritative figures. You can pull this from your own example. What are those? All right. And then they go into practical action. All right. If you form your communication in this, you are going to always communicate in a way that leads somebody to practical action. So your practical action today is to begin to communicate and to craft something that has one point that leads somebody to a practical action that carries them through the skeleton of painting the picture, magnifying the problem, showing them the pain that is associated with that problem, delivering them the possibilities of what could happen and the principles that they need to make that happen, and give them the practical action so they leave with some sort of transformation. All right, I'll see you tomorrow.